Thank you to Warby Parker for sponsoring the Squanch. Get boutique quality, stylish eyewear and sunglasses at revolutionary prices. Head to warbyparker.com/squanch to order your free home try-on kit with free shipping all around. What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Squanch Wisecracks Rick and Morty podcast. My name is Jared, and joined here with the Squanchers, we got Alec.
Wubby lubby doop doop.
And joining us again is the man who reluctantly reacts to the nickname Dr. Nihilism.
I will leave if it gets said more than 3 times.
Yeah, so Ryan is still trying to get to Burning Man, so we don't know if he'll make it or not. He doesn't have a ticket, but so he will not be with us today. But today we're breaking down Rick and Morty Season 2, Episode 7, Big Trouble in Little Sanchez. So, but before we get into that, I believe we have just a little bit of Rick and Morty news to go over, Alec, right?
We do. So recently, Justin Roiland sorry, let me just actually read this so please delete this. Yeah. So just a little bit of news. Justin Roiland signed a deal with Hulu for his own animated sitcom. It's called Solar Opposites. It's about extraterrestrial refugees on Earth. I guess he was a writing assistant at one point, will be a co-creator on there. So same humor.
Yeah, that sounds very cool. I'm sure that he's probably the hottest commodity in town, and I'm sure there was a bidding war between Hulu and
him being like, why are you signing this deal instead of writing the next season of Rick and Morty?
I think they are writing it. I mean,
I 100% know that they are.
Oh,
I know they're writing it, but like
improv community has been hired to write on that show.
Okay.
Can I send them an angry letter?
Yes.
Why aren't they here? You need to hit up this adjacent human being.
Okay.
All right, so talking about Rick and Morty Season 2, Episode 7, Big Trouble in Little Sanchez. Let's get some first impressions. What was it like watching this episode for the first time, and what was it like revisiting it? Let's start with our guest, Mr. Burns.
This episode for me was less enjoyable on a rewatch.
Yeah.
Just because value from my humble perspective. Just because the ideas explored are pretty straightforward. I think there was a few. I think the one thing I appreciated more this time was the vampire subplot and how they completely don't show anything until after the credits. And for whatever reason, I found that really delightful. That once they go on the journey, they're immediately, well, found it.
Yeah. Like the not only the inciting incident, but the conclusion of the inciting incident is all off screen.
Yes, which I think is very fun, really impressive. But yeah, so I would say like the first time I watched this, it would have been a solid A- for me. Now I'm feeling more like B.
Yeah.
Trying to remember back, I definitely really like this episode, and I like the Tiny Rick bit, but I still think it's like a solid A. Even though it's just fun, I think like even in comparison to Get Swifty, this episode I think just lands better for me. Like Rick's singing and dancing and all that stuff, whereas Get Swifty is, when you really think about it, just like a really annoying song.
Oh, I don't know. I kind of think Get Swifty's fun. At least I think the lyrics are funny.
No. I'm not shitting on Getting Swifty, but the lyrics are fun, but the song is meant to be a stupid, annoying song.
Yes.
Whereas like Get Me Out, this is not a dance. It's catchy.
Yeah, that part's pretty great.
Yeah.
Yeah. The first time I saw this episode, I think I liked it, but you know, it's funny, Michael brings up the vampire thing. I totally forgot about that. When I started the episode and we have that cold open where they talk about that a teacher or a lunch lady has been killed by vampires, I'm like, what episode is this? I don't remember this at all. And I guess the reason why is because, I mean, that is initially the reason why Tiny Rick goes to school, but to be cool. But yeah, rewatching it, I like the concept of Nuptia 4, the marriage counseling planet. I think that's a really creative conceit. I like what they did with Beth and Jerry's marriage, which we'll talk about a little bit more. I guess the Tiny Rick thing is the subplot I like less. But
really?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm tempted to think back about like, okay, so Big Trouble in Little Sanchez. I don't think there's any Big Trouble in Little China references, at least that I can think of. And this doesn't. I'm trying to think of all of those movies like Back to School with Rodney Dangerfield, where where an older person goes back to school and then becomes super popular and becomes an asset.
It's kind of like
kid.
Teen Wolfie.
Okay.
Like the Michael J. Fox one to a certain.
Fellow Kids.
Oh yeah. What is that from?
I feel like when this genre of movies or this narrative was popular, this is like when I was like a real little kid.
Yeah.
This is like more of their like early 90s throwback that I'm a little bit lost on.
Yeah. No, I get that.
Yeah. But anyway, that's not to knock the episode at all. I would say it's mid-tier Rick and Morty.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it's not as clever, doesn't tickle your brain as much as Get Swifty or some of the other one-liners, but I really do like when Principal Vagina takes Tiny Rick off to the side and says, "Look, I'm going to have to expel you, TR. we just can't have students killing teachers."
I know, he's like, I hate to do this.
yeah. But anyway, let's go into a recap. So, another marital spat between Beth and Jerry causes Rick to send them to Nuptia 4, a couples therapy planet that manifests each partner's unconscious projection of their significant other, called mythologues. Jerry's mythologue of Beth is a ruthless, emasculating alien queen, and Beth's mythologue of Jerry is a weak, cowardly worm. Meanwhile, the death of a lunch lady at the hands of an apparent vampire causes Rick to turn himself into a tiny version of himself in order to popularity. Tiny Rick easily kills the vampire, and satisfied with his newfound popularity, Summer, and Morty are... Damn it. Sorry. Tiny Rick easily kills the vampire, and satisfied with the newfound popularity Summer, and Morty are enjoying, decides to stay in tiny form. Tiny Rick throws a party at the Smith house, but something odd happens when he sings the lyrics depict the voice of old Rick begging for freedom. Planet. Summer approaches Tiny Rick and tries to convince him that the real Rick is trapped somewhere in his new young mind. Tiny Rick dismisses it and gets ready for the school dance. The Beth mythologue captures real Beth and straps her to the machine to create an army of Worm Jerrys to take over the universe. Summer rats on Tiny Rick and gets him expelled for killing the vampire gym coach, so Tiny Rick makes a scene in front of all the kids in school, ruining Summer's reputation. As Beth starts to populate more Worm Jerrys, the real Jerry shows up with a machine gun to save Beth. As a result, Beth's mental projection of Jerry evolves, and is just about to kill his old man body for good when Summer and Morty use Elliott Smith to bring old Rick's consciousness to the forefront and turn him back into his old self. There's no stopping Queen Beth until Jerry puts the machine onto a heroic Jerry, whose image of Beth is a goddess. Goddess Beth kills alien Queen Beth, and the two lovers decide to stay married, at least until Morty goes to college. End of episode. All right, guys, before we move on, I want to give a shout-out to our sponsors over at Warby Parker. So Warby Parker is a glasses company. They make high-quality, stylish, and affordable glasses that start at only $95, including prescription lenses. Plus, all lenses include anti-glare and anti-scratch coatings. For every pair of glasses sold by Warby Parker, they give a pair of sunglasses to someone in need. So, the great thing about Warby Parker is they make buying glasses online easy and risk-free with their home try-on program. I actually tried it myself. It gave me a better chance to test out which frames I like the best. If you're actually watching this on YouTube right now, you can actually see me visually trying them on. The process was very simple. I went on the site, picked my frames, and they came to my door very fast. It saved me a trip to the store, and I was able to give the frames a trial run. I have them shipped straight to your door. You keep them for 5 days before sending them back and using a prepaid. Just head to warbyparker.com/squanch to place your order. Make sure you download the Warby Parker app from the iTunes App Store. If you have an iPhone 10, you can even try their new Find Your Fit feature. So try it out yourself by heading over to warbyparker.com/squanch to order your own free home try-on kit with free shipping all around. That's warbyparker.com/squanch, all lowercase, SQANCH. Thanks to Warby Parker for sponsoring.
Yeah, I have two things I could bring up. I'll just do hold on. But I have a quick question before we actually start a real conversation, which is, did you guys notice that Tiny Rick says something like "wubby lubby doop doop," which sounds like "wubba lubba dub dub," but it's different.
It's like his pain has been cured. This is kind of one of the interesting things about this episode. It's actually very similar to the Toxic Rick episode in season 3, because the fact that you're old, the fact that we're all going to die one day, the fact that the universe is so big nothing in it matters. those facts are who you are. So you're trapped in there, and you can only come out in the form of tiny angsty or like adult angsty things are who you really are. It's interesting to see that, you know, once you take that away, he doesn't say I'm in great pain anymore.
Wubby lubby doop doop means like my life is great.
That's
like
a good
I'm
question.
so happy.
Yeah. But it's not like a real happiness, right? It's just like kind of super ego type thing. Not super ego. Thing we all do to sort of get through the day.
Well,
So
I think what Summer says before that is a bit telling. She says, Grandpa, I think that when you put your mind into this body's young brain, it did what young brains do. It shoved the bad thoughts into the back and put a wall around them. But those bad thoughts are the real Rick. Does that ring true to you guys? Like, I feel like this is a thing that all human brains do, push the bad thoughts to the back. Is it really something that young brains do more?
Well, I feel like young brains don't have the like tools and vocabulary to articulate those things.
The bad things?
Yeah. So I feel like maybe when you're, I don't know what everyone else was like, but when you're 14, 15, 16, you kind of like intuitively have this sense, or you start to get this sense of like, oh, bad things could happen. Maybe the world doesn't mean what I thought it did. Maybe the claims of like my religious or ethical youth are wrong. But you can't articulate that or express it in a way that you can when maybe you're in like your early to mid 20s.
Right.
So,
but that's not pushing it back. It's still present. It's still weighing on you, but you just can't express it, right?
But I think it's still pushing it back, because you can't, at that stage of life, if you're trying to, like, at least when I was in school back in the 60s, but like you can't express that. Like, it wouldn't be considered cool. Like, if you're 25 years old, you can say to a friend, hey, I've been wondering about this, or thinking about the meaninglessness of everything, or feeling anxious. But if you're like 15, like, I would have been called words that are not appropriate to say anymore.
Yeah, see, I think this is a generational gap thing. I think I'm more in your generation, but even in my generation, like, I was in high school by the time emo music became cool.
Same.
Oh, okay.
But see, I felt like found that really relatable, because I remember that age of having only listened to like pop and like rap music, which at least at that point wasn't very emotionally expressive, hearing some emo stuff for the first time and like getting sad and feeling like that was a mechanism to express things that I couldn't.
It's like the
otherwise.
only mechanism.
Yeah, the only one. So that's why I thought the Elliott Smith thing was so real. I remember listening to like Dashboard Confessional and Bright Eyes and some other things, and being like, what are these feelings?
What about Hawthorne Heights? Remember that?
That one didn't do it for me, but
that one seemed over the top angsty.
Yeah,
that was the one when I was like, all right, I got to check out of this movie.
Yeah,
man. No, I think you're onto something.
I think that for most teens, the ways that they have to express anxiety about the world or displeasure is mostly through, if you decide to go goth or listen to a bunch of like Bright Eyes and cry in your room, whereas now as an adult you're just like, oh yeah, like I'm a weird socially anxious person, and there's a like inevitable heat death the universe, but like whatever, that's just like who I am. Like I'm gonna go to work and not listen to Bright Eyes about it. Like I guess it becomes more the angst becomes part of your identity when you're a teen, whereas I feel like adults are just like, yeah, this is life.
Wow. And how much like for all the teens listening right now, what a gift. They get 3 grown men telling them what they feel and what it's like. I just want to say you're welcome.
Well, I'm actually curious. We've talked about this a couple times on the podcast, but how does the age of social media, that's something that happens more among high school students? Is it a more socially accepted?
Found it, and I'm not going to say anything about it, but I think it still exists somewhere online. I just made it a challenge. But it was like so dark and weird, and like it was literally
Zanga?
Cool. I wanted to ask Brittany out, but I don't think I could do it because she's so cool, and like that type of shit.
Yeah.
Whereas like,
I think I was too afraid to do that.
Yeah.
Although I don't know if
no one read
anyone will remember this, but there was LiveJournal, but there was also a thing called Dead Journal, which was just LiveJournal if you were angsty.
Shit.
But isn't that just LiveJournal?
But back then, LiveJournal and Zanga people were all like that. So maybe your other Zanga friends would read it, and their username would be like XX sad girl XX, and you'd be friends that way. But like the cool kids in school didn't know what the fuck that was. Whereas nowadays, if you're on Instagram or something, everyone else is in your school. So I feel like I mean, this is kind of what the movie 8th Grade touches on a little bit, I feel like.
I haven't seen it yet.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
But one of the things in that movie, they show young people expressing, whereas I feel like maybe in our generation-ish, early social media is where you could go to actually express who you were, because then in school you had to like put on your happy face.
Right. Yeah.
This might just be New York, but I have this therapist, and they all just like mention, like in New York as an adult,
That
you're
has to
just
be
like,
true.
oh yeah, I like saw my therapist, and it's like a totally normal thing to talk about. But I feel like that's maybe what being like a kid is in New York now as well. Which
Do you guys not think this is like a super cynical portrayal of adulthood? Like, are we meant to believe that all like our anxieties and our ugly parts that we can't express or that we push behind or into the back of our minds in middle school and high school, those are just the people that we grow into? That I mean,
I've really grown into all the things that I used to be anxious about.
But then I think the difference is like when you're young, you might like repress or push it away, and then you might have your like adult emo-y phase. But then I don't know, you like read some books, you go to therapy, you realize that even if life doesn't mean anything, you can create meaning and find truth and value. So I think there's a way to like, it's not just that you become an adult, you listen to Elliott Smith, and you're just a sad old bastard. I think maybe your dumb pubescent brain can't.
Right.
yeah.
So I don't think it's necessarily
I guess
cynical.
that would have been interesting to me if we saw Tiny Rick perhaps confronted with things that regular Rick assumes, like the meaninglessness of the universe or something like that, and then he was like unable to handle it, or it didn't register in his brain or something like that. He had to avoid it. That could have been potentially interesting.
Well, I also think part of what Summer's saying is the more you're a teenager, you feel invincible. So maybe if you told Tiny Rick, like, oh, you know, the universe is going to end, he's like, whatever, like, I'm going to go to the football game and be popular.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, he can just ignore it.
I think he would actually go to the big dance, as
Big
the
Dance.
sign said outside of the gym. I think.
Yeah. At
Which I loved.
Harry Herpson High.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I have maybe this is a dumb question or a great question.
One or
The
the other.
mythologues. If your significant other could make a mythologue of you, what do you think? What is your
This is so personal.
Yeah. I know
well,
exactly.
hold on.
what it is.
I can start because I feel like my girlfriend, I would be like a bear that was just like rummaging through all the food, so she had to like hide it up in a tree so I didn't find it.
God. All right, Burns, you're going next, man. I can't.
Yeah, mine would be like probably a sloth-like creature that was slow moving, kind of lazy, but who thought he knew everything. So this particular
I'll say actually a lot.
this law says things like actually and stuff like, you know, well, technically the way they cook that pasta in Sicily involves this type of emulsification, but do whatever you want.
I think mine would be, my girlfriend would imagine me as a dog who's always hungry.
Yeah. And then the important thing with all this, once again, for all the teens listening, we all have partners. We're all cool guys in relationships. So one day
And
you
they're
can
all
be like
perfect.
us. They're all perfect.
Yeah. Whole toxic Rick / Tiny Rick thing. I love that Morty never gives a shit about reality here. He's always just, he'll more or less go with anything if it means he's getting closer to Jessica, even if it's
Yeah.
like Tiny Rick or, you know, him killing old Rick. Although interestingly, I like the arc in this episode that, you know, when he fucks with his sister, it crosses the line.
Yeah. That was a
But,
nice moment.
but in Toxic Rick, what is the thing that makes him cross the line? Doesn't he just like give? What happens, Alec?
I don't remember, man.
It's like he's like Wolf of Wall Street.
But that's his toxic self.
He calls Rick. Yeah, he's his toxic self. He calls Rick, and Rick like triangulates his position and just shows up. And Morty's like, toxic Morty or clean Morty, healthy Morty is like, oh, you found me, and then just gives up. But I don't think he ever comes upon the epiphany that like, wow, I really need that toxic side of myself. Like, I guess he says that Tiny Rick really needs the toxic old version Rick, or else he's just gonna be a fucking douche and fuck with my sister like he did.
But I loved when
Yeah.
he came back and the first thing Rick said is like, you were ready to let me die to get some trim or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah. But you
Has
know,
anyone ever heard trim? I've never heard that slang. Is that real slang or did they
It's
just
have.
invent that?
100% real
I
saying.
have, and in fact, I remember a very specific citation. Have you guys ever seen the movie Barbershop
Yes.
with Ice Cube?
Yes.
there's a part where I believe the bad guy, who's played by the like a mega haircut place, but the idea is that it's like he's going to put the barbershop at it, but in the movie he says you can get a trim and then get some trim at my barbershop.
All right, I feel.
And when I watched Barbershop as a kid, I was like, I get it now.
Well, and Barbershop is set in Chicago, right?
I think so, yeah.
Because, a creepy old man who is also... All the 13-year-olds listening, now you know what trim means. Well, we haven't said it, but you can figure it out.
I know what trim means, but I don't understand, like, it's not obvious where how the sexual act represents the term. You know what I'm saying?
It's one of those things where, like, I think I get, but I don't want to say why I think I get it. Yeah, and I'm gonna stand by that. I will not articulate it, but I'm pretty sure I get it.
I think that could be a fun podcast segment of us trying to figure out why slang is awkward white guys guessing at how slang has its origins.
That ends well.
I'm obsessed with Edym Online. It's an etymology website for normal words, but this really interests me.
Yeah. All right, so there's a line at the end that I don't really know what to make of because I can't tell if we're being trolled or not. So
Oh, yeah. I know exactly what you were going to say, but go ahead.
Yeah, so basically, Rick says, or no, I think it's...
A and the B plot, let's think about how they relate to each other.
I highly doubt that.
Fuck that guy.
When I imagine Dan Harmon...
React video of a Wisecrack video, and I happened to have written that one. It was the most uncomfortable experience of my life watching it.
You watched the whole thing?
Huh?
You watched the whole thing?
Maybe I watched 4 minutes, and they weren't saying anything negative, but it was still insanely uncomfortable. Even I was sitting alone in my room.
Wow.
Yeah, I saw somebody linked in one of the podcast chats recently of a response video to one of our videos, and I was like, there's no way I'm subjecting myself to this.
I won't even read YouTube comments anymore.
Really?
Yeah, I've tried to just not, because it's like there'll be 95% just innocuous, or people that seem cool, they get what's going on, and then the one person who's some dark web conspiracy theorist who says one crazy.
If those people aren't on your site, then you're just not succeeding on some level.
You want to be worth trolling?
Yeah, you want to be worth trolling.
That's fair.
Because if no one's trolling you, that means that just nothing's worse than just no one caring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a weird, probably accurate, but terrifying statement that
But Michael
we've never done business with Funny or Die, so it doesn't bother me. All right, so we talked about the subconscious. I mean, there's nothing else here. Well. So Michael, you said that you thought that they weren't subconscious.
Well,
there is a line where he says that these are the negative subconscious feelings.
Yeah, but then it's like a subconscious projection of someone else, which seems tangentially related, but not analogous to Rick or Tiny Rick repressing just his own unconscious or subconscious thoughts. So I think that's not quite the same thing.
I mean, if we were to say that the general consensus even talking about.
But see, maybe I'm just being dumb and I'm falling for the trap Harmon set via Rick, and I just want to believe that that's right.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to prove.
We don't need that.
But I also think the mythologues are two computer programmers to make an AI mythologue of their partner and then just see how they interact.
Yeah, so I want to talk. So as basically the leader guy at Nuptia 4 is showing them how the mythologues work, he says, you may already be learning something important. All these relationships are different. None of them are real and none of them work. And he's talking specifically about the mythologues, not necessarily the people from which the mythologues came. He says, we are not the monsters we sometimes see each other as because we are real and we are functional. That's what makes us better than them. We can find solutions, we can adapt, we can communicate, and most importantly, we can work together. There's so much that their mythologues get along better than they do.
Well, isn't it just the codependency thing? Whereas the other mythologues fight where theirs are interrelated such that they
person leads to this codependency where your mythologue can work together in a not healthy way, but still, threaten to take over the galaxy or something.
What does that mean to be subconsciously codependent but consciously hate each other?
There could be a relationship that's by no standard metric functional.
Right.
Oh.
Yeah.
Sorry to bring up like a sad thing.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Yeah, so the codependent thing, I couldn't really tell if that was relevant or if that was just a really clever kind of like relationship term that was thrown in to make it a joke.
Yeah.
Well, I also think it's an interesting way to frame their relationship because they're both shitty people who blame, well, at least Beth like blames her mishaps on Jerry's shittiness, but it's like equally her fault.
Yeah.
Well, that's why it is almost interesting too to see, and I guess we see it at one point kind of mediated via a couple levels, but you almost want to see their conceptions of themselves as well. Like not, so you know what I mean? So not like Jerry's conception of Beth as this monster, maybe Beth's conception of herself as this perfect,
I guess we kind of see that with a couple added mediators at the end when she's the goddess.
So yeah, it's interesting to like get to that point as well.
Yeah. I mean, I love this subplot so much just because the show oftentimes affirms Beth and Jerry's partnership, but always in the darkest way.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And this is no different. They're married not only is it a planet that specializes in...
Wait, so do either of you ever get a little bored or tired with the fact that Beth and Jerry's marriage just kind of sucks? And they seem to circle around it in different ways, but it seems like it doesn't...
You're right. And I think the show has a couple things like that. Even Ring Anywhere, and maybe that's just a setup, but I think mostly they're just trying to keep it ambiguous to keep it kind of funny.
Great character, by all means, just in how she functions to Morty, but... in one episode, she just doesn't even know his name, and then they're going to the prom together, or excuse me, the big dance together, and then it's a type.
See, I think if this was a live action show, they would get flack for that.
Yeah.
Because if you had a real show and there was like an actor playing Jessica, who's basically just like a prop to represent this thing, I think it would almost border, whether it would be problematic or not, I think it'd get criticized because it's just so there's literally no development.
Yeah, but I mean, there's Summer and Beth, which are both great
for sure. But
yeah.
in the Jessica, it's just funny.
But she only exists to any joke. I'm not complaining about it.
Oh no, for sure.
And Summer has her equivalence with Brad. I love Brad.
Yeah.
Brad didn't die, did he?
I hope not.
I think so. I don't think I'd remember that.
Is Brad
because Brad is
in
in season 3. Yeah, I think Brad is in season 3. So I don't know. I guess there's just a whole bunch of smooth operators over at Harry Herpson High.
Yeah. It's fun when she shows like solid backbone in this episode though.
Yeah.
Like, and I like
especially since we've seen popularity is her greatest desire in many episodes.
For sure, and like she's willing in a certain sense to sacrifice that, and of course Morty was not willing in any way, shape, or form to sacrifice time with Jessica. Even if it meant Rick dying.
Yeah. It's weird how there have been a couple episodes where Summer has achieved popularity. So there's the Meeseeks episode, but it never really fulfills her.
No.
Do you think that in the next season we're maybe going to see kind of a priority shift with her?
Or maybe
I think that Morty's still going to be fixated on Jessica.
She'll have this like terrible reign as the popular kid. That will be kind of a joke.
But is to really buy into the popularity thing, whereas Morty as being the dumber one is fine.
Oh, like
isn't it touched upon?
Her only thing seems to be probably to get those attractive boys.
Right, like the episode in season 3 where she gets bigger boobs or whatever, turns her into a giant monster.
Yeah, I guess in my head, I thought that there's episodes or certain moments where she seems to be the only one exhibiting like common sense.
Well, she definitely does in this episode. I mean, she's able to come up with the conclusion that, hey, Tiny Rick, real Rick is in your subconscious or your teen angst screaming to get released.
Yeah, she's able to read those subtle clues like "get me out."
Yeah.
Oh.
I would love. I really liked in season 3 the part where Summer and Beth were kind of bonding together, especially that amazing line when Beth is like, "I'm coming, baby, and Mama cares about your titties." Yeah, so I'd like to see more of that in season 4 for sure. All right, guys, do you have anything else you want to bring up before we go into the mailbag?
Hold on, I'm getting really bad plosives. This is just like a joke that I really like at the beginning where Rick is convincing them not to be stressed out about vampires. Did you guys notice that about vampires? He's like, of course they're real, but you're way more likely to die from like an auto accident or heart disease.
Yeah, I like that.
I really appreciated that joke.
I didn't
Yeah.
really like that cold open. It was like long. It was like 2.5 minutes, and it was just them at the table. Not a lot was really established other than the vampire thing, but that took a long time.
Yeah.
Right.
I would say like my favorite joke in this episode is probably Morty's "Get your shit together" speech. I don't know, that one really did it for me. I think that's when I found
put it in your
funnier on
backpack.
rewatch. Yeah, when he pops back.
There are a
Yeah,
lot of
we should
jokes
just all
like
start
that
saying
that
that.
you see. Yeah, that you see these jokes in memes and stuff on the internet, and I can never put together like, wait, what episode is that from? And then when I see it, I'm like, oh, okay, I
Yeah.
remember now. All right, Alec, you got some questions picked out from the mailbag?
I have so many questions.
Oh, I
Well,
love
not so
this
many.
part.
But if anyone would like to email us any questions, you can hit us up at squanch@wisecrack.co. But in the meantime, so for context, last week we were talking about the giant cromulans threatening the world and people worshiping them. And I had a question for our viewers, for people. And we got two really cool answers, so I'm going to read them. The first one is from Nick. People faith in regards to joining headism. I have an undergraduate degree in theology, so I'm not going to pretend I'm Thomas Aquinas, but I am still a practicing Protestant Christian and am a theist. I probably don't speak for most people, as I do not believe what we call symbolic concepts like the Trinity, the Buddha, or Atman. By the way, this really sounds like something Austin wrote. But anyway, I am a
This is
religious
Austin.
pluralist, which is also not the majority view. But then Kyle says that if the Cromulans reared their ugly heads, I would think that they were aliens and that they had their own culture on an exclusive claim to an individual image of God. Anyways, love the Squanch and all of Wisecrack.
Thanks, Austin, for that message.
Yeah, for that ghost right.
Anybody.
Yeah, I really appreciate the thoughtfulness of that email, but I have to say, like, at one level, doesn't that all go out the fucking door when you walk outside and there's a giant head in the sky who's controlling the weather?
Yeah, I mean, don't they deal with this in both like Arrival and Independence Day? Aren't there little like cut tos or sort of things about like how religious communities deal with that?
I think in Arrival, it's just like background on a screen. that
Yeah.
some people are starting to pray to it or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
And you said the other one was Independence Day.
Yeah.
I have a feeling, at least for some groups, that they might not think that the alien was God, but like if it was sowing all this destruction, it was sent by God to bring about the end times or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I would think. I think a lot of American evangelicals would read it in an apocalyptic lens and almost use it as fuel to their fears of temptation or something, and they would find a verse in Revelation that justified it. I would guess, but Austin can correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I mean, that sounds like
so-
something Austin would agree. I mean, who knows? Not going to put words in his mouth.
I will.
Religious aisle of the Judeo-Christian divide. He says, "Hey guys, I really enjoy your podcast. You should all be very proud of the work you do, adding serious thought to pop culture. Thanks. Thank you, Matanya. I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly." He also says he doesn't normally write into things, but he wanted to give his feedback. So his background, he's a religious Jew. He says I spent 5 years in yeshiva, spend time every day studying the Talmud, pray 3 times a day, go to shul, keep Shabbos and kosher, et cetera, et cetera. That is to say, he's an Orthodox Jew. His words. He says, I think I would react like you guys would to giant flying heads in the sky and controlling the weather. I would assume it's aliens and we're all pretty screwed. This is really just part of a larger subject of how religious people deal. For me, I would describe myself as a rationalist. The Torah is a code of laws for me to live by in order to enhance and enrich my life and to hopefully make me a better person. If giants' head appeared in the sky, it doesn't change. Similar thing with Darwin and natural selection. And he says, if Darwin is right, it just proves that like God created this like awesome system of natural laws and stuff. Then he continues, the Bible is meant to be a living history. The Torah is meant to be a guide. To the religious rationalist, what's important here is that God created the universe and established natural and moral laws. So an appearance of giant floating heads doesn't undermine this. Sorry for the long email. I just think rationalist religious viewpoint isn't widely known, and I thought I'd take the opportunity to share it a little bit. It's a bit tiresome hearing lazy attacks on religion, like in this episode of Rick and Morty, but you guys actually seem to understand that religious people are not necessarily backwards, hateful, superstitious idiots, so that's cool. Thanks, Matanya. I thought this was a cool email.
Yeah, very cool.
That's not
and
Austin.
that's a classic thing. A lot of the practicing Jews I know are very much like that, and that's the interesting. It's not that they adhere to their beliefs more as a series of principles rather than a narrative that has to have any basis in truth. So, yeah, if there's a giant floating head in the sky, that doesn't compromise the set of beliefs that you think make the world a better place, to a kind of theistic religion that believes there really is only one God that created it in 6 days, and there's a giant head in the
gender of that name. I apologize. But yeah, it sounds like someone who's committed to a rational religious principle, which seems to be very different from like a certain type of theism that would argue that, you know, underlying a kernel of rationalism.
This is a bit of a not related, but I've always wondered, you know how like in legal contracts it says.
So does it just mean weather, basically?
Yeah, so that's what I ultimately came to.
My guess is it's common law, where back in the day in English courts, they would actually just view weather as like actually God. So now that when we say it's like, yeah, we mean like weather, or like if a temporal rift opens in the middle of the earth.
Because the whole thing about an act of God is that if God all of a sudden reveals himself, then doesn't like all man-made law it ceases to matter?
Yeah, but we're still one nation under God, and we still swear on the Bible, and we still
but if God reveals himself, we are one nation under God, as long as that's what he wants, you know?
Yeah.
He, she, whatever, you know? It's just that if he reveals himself and he's all-powerful, we're just his bitch, you know?
Wow, he's going to be really upset.
99 more seasons of Rick and Morty. That's all I care about.
That's kind of what already happened, basically. It was maybe an act of God that we're getting however many episodes we are.
70-something.
Yeah.
Yeah, a whole bunch. All right, any more questions, Alec?
Yeah.
We do. The next one is from JM, different topic. JM says, Dear Squanchers, love the Wisecrack podcast lineup, your video library, and all your thought-provoking content you give away so generously, so thanks. I wanted to write in for a while and relate Rick and Morty to the philosophy of solipsism. Thank you, JT, for bringing it up. That was the other emailer. JMJT, I see what's going on. Anyway, yes, your reading of solipsism created yesterday, but about considering that and many other mind-shredding possibilities, which, etc. B, yes, Descartes, praise B, suggested a demon could be maliciously controlling the information we ingest, and as such demonstrated point A. And also C, no, Ryan, you cannot trust your own thoughts, as their independence is dubious and their influence is almost certainly biased by either the faulty meat engine that is the human brain, or potentially by a devious demon or secret society a la Hereditary. I hope that's not a spoiler. I haven't seen Hereditary. Why this makes Rick and Morty one of my favorite shows, and Total Recall one of my favorite episodes thereof, is that Cosmic Core often suggests the human experience is one that may never have access to truths of the universe. JM goes on about the Total Recall episode and the memory parasites, and just essentially always questioning our ability to actually know anything, especially as Beth kills Mr. Poopy Butler.
Response, but great email.
The last email is from Cody. Cody was rewatching Rick and Morty with a girl that he was hanging out with.
Cool.
One day, Cody says, just listen to the Get Swifty episode and had a funny story you guys might enjoy. A year and a half ago, I was watching Rick and Morty with a girl I was hanging out with. One day we were watching the Get Swifty episode and it gave me an idea. Later that day, immediately after some XXX stuff happened, good job, Cody, I said to her, I like what you got. Luckily, she thought it was one of the funniest things she had ever heard and laughed so much she literally cried. Fast forward to the present, we're now living together and expecting our first child. Here's to hoping our future daughter doesn't shit on the floor.
I do want to say to Cody, when he says XXX, like there's so many ways to say that. That makes me think that they're into some stuff. Like that signifies, I feel like some heavy activity. I mean, good for them, but.
No, I mean, everyone should know Burns wrote a script where he has like 800
XXX.
different analogies for jizz.
That's fun though.
Alfredo. Do you remember any others?
No, I've had to push them out of my brain. But that Cody's story reminds me of, and I don't know if y'all have seen it, but that's a thing. And in the end, this won't ruin anything. There's a point in 8th grade where there's two young lovers, not like lovers in a Cody style XXX way. That movie for any Rick and Morty heads, and I guess Bo Burnham said in an interview that they actually improvise. Now there's a long tradition.
It's amazing how ubiquitous this show is now. Yeah, it's so big.
From a sort of emotional movie about 8th graders to Cody's sexual exploits that have led to a new human.
The daughter's definitely going to shit on the floor. That's just unavoidable. You have to you have to accept that and move on.
Yeah, it's going to be bad. Wow.
I hope that the middle name is Swifty.
For our sake, yes. For that child's sake, I hope God no that it's not. 'cause that wouldn't be fun.
Middle names, it could just be blank S blank. I mean, middle names you can get away with a crazy one.
Yeah, but then some kid finds it online and they make fun of her and it like ruins her life.
You think Swifty would ruin someone's life? I think it's it's relatively inane.
My view of children is that they're all sociopathic monsters who want any excuse to ruin your life.
You're not wrong.
Yeah.
I hope Cody knows this.
Cody knows, and they're going to create a loving environment by which she'll be able to fight off the sociopaths. Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's about it. We're going to go ahead and wrap it up. Gentlemen, where can we find you guys on the internet? Michael.
Oh, I'm on and that's all I'm giving you right now.
Well, you got to also tell us about the music podcast that we're launching soon.
Oh,
that
yeah.
you are hosting.
Oh, my God, yes. If you all like music and you want to get a little nerdy about music in that classic and fun Wisecrack style, we have a podcast called Wise Tracks that's going to premiere soon, and I would love it if y'all would listen, and in particular, if you would give us feedback, because we'd love that.
We've been getting requests for years to do the stuff that we do, but apply it to music, and I have never been the man for the job, so... Mr. Burns,
listen, and please do get in touch if you have thoughts or things you'd want to hear us talk about.
Yeah, it's not up yet, probably by the time this airs, but it will be up.
Stay vigilant.
Soon. Actually, maybe it will be. I don't know. I mean, it's off to being edited.
Cool.
Anyway, and Alec.
You can find me on Twitter at WisecrackAlec, and that's about it.
Rock and roll, guys. All right. Well, we will see you next time with season 2, episode 8. Dan and Justin better hurry the hell up, man, because we're running out of episodes. But until next time, wubba lubba dub dub. Peace.
See ya.
Bye.